primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
This is a poem by Wendell. Suppose we did our work like the snow, quietly, leaving nothing out. My name's Dr. Brewer Eberly of the Fisher Clinic, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Brewer Eberly is a third-generation family physician at the Fisher Clinic in Raleigh, North Carolina, and a research affiliate with the Theology, Medicine, and Culture Initiative at Duke Divinity School. He completed his family medicine residency and chief residency at AnnMed Health in Anderson, South Carolina, and is a fellow of both the Theology, Medicine, and Culture Fellowship at Duke Divinity School and the Paul Ramsey Institute with the Center for Bioethics and Culture. He has been published widely, including JAMA, Society of Teachers of Family Medicine, and the New Atlantis, as well as theological spaces like Mere Orthodoxy, Christianity Today, and Plow. His artwork has been featured on the cover of Academic Medicine and in the AMA Journal of Ethics. While the majority of his time is spent caring for his patients, his writing explores the intersections of medicine, aesthetics, bioethics, and Christian theology, with a particular eye towards medical trainee formation, the nourishment of weary clinicians, and the relationship between beauty and clinical ethics. He and his wife, Dendi, have 3 sons and worship at Redeemer Anglican Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Eberly.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's a delight.
For the audience, it's been a lovely time connecting with Dr. Eberly to get to this interview date because both of us have young kids. And so it is so exciting to talk to another DPC doctor who understands the world of DPC while managing young kids and having the ability to craft your livelihood around your family and around your patients the way that you wanted to. And you particularly have a very interesting story in that you heard about the Fisher Clinic before you even graduated residency. So just wanted to drop that little nugget there before we get going. But thank you so much for being here today and taking time out of your day.
Oh yeah, no, thank you again. And I should say my wife is the real hero here, taking our sons.
Yeah, I echo that one. My husband's downstairs with R2, so that's awesome.
Yes.
So I wanted to highlight again that idea that you had learned about DPC before you graduated residency. And I will say that it's not the most common thing to hear. It is becoming more and more common, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to even go back a little bit farther into the drive that you had to become a family medicine physician, as well as a DPC family medicine physician. Yes. So could you please share what was going on between 3rd and 4th year of medical school that really helped you in terms of what I have read from material that you've written, really helped codify your journey into family medicine in particular?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. For having told the story so many times, I don't have a great summarized version of it, but so between my 3rd and 4th year of med school, I did a fellowship called the Theology, Medicine, Culture Fellowship at Duke Divinity School. I had met a physician named Far Curlin doing a separate medical ethics seminar when I was a 2nd year medical student. And he had just been talking about this idea of launching a cohort that would bring together clinicians, ethicists, public health students, seminary students, throw them all in the same classroom together for a year of kind of intense formation. And I was like, man, that sounds amazing. And I'll probably never be able to do it. But in the middle of my 3rd year of medical school, I was troubled by what I sensed was happening to me. I guess is probably the simplest way to put it. This sort of vast vision of medicine that I'd inherited from my grandfather and my dad, who were both family physicians, that I sort of expected to see in medical school was just not what I was seeing all the time. And I experienced a kind of dehumanization that I didn't know what to do with. I love the anatomy lab. I sort of sensed the calling of medicine there, but then I sensed that calling shift in its form and how my day-to-day process worked. And I basically was struggling and just not doing well. So I was seriously thinking about quitting medicine. And I don't know if I can't remember how this happened, if I called him up or just emailed him, but emailed Far and he said, don't give up just yet. Come do this year with us. And so I did that year. It was life-changing. It's, again, hard to summarize everything that year did and what the fellowship represents, but it really did change the trajectory of my vocation. Completed that, came back to finish fourth year of medical school. I actually didn't match afterward. So spent a year in Raleigh doing postpartum hemorrhage, hepatitis C research through UNC, and then reapplied to residency during that year. And during that, there's a lot of steps here. During that 1 year of research, I had been struggling with, should I go to family, the kind of first love that I thought I would do? And again, back to this mentor Far, he said, before you write off family's medicine, you got to check out this place called the Fisher Clinic. And his exact words were, it's a place so beautiful, it'll make you cry. You know, I've said this before, that this isn't a friend who's prone to exaggeration. So coming from him, that kind of thing was striking. And so I did. I came to the Fisher Clinic in 2018, only spent a day with them. But then over the course of my residency, we maintained contact and a kind of slow friendship formed. And it's out of that friendship that I was asked to come here. And it's just been beautiful and sort of healing for all involved. And it's a little weird in that regard that it grew out of a natural friendship developing over many years. It wasn't me logging onto a website searching for DPC. It was sort of discovering this model through friends and then maintaining contact for many years.
And also through the idea that you had experienced dehumanization of possibly yourself as well as your patients, and it was in alignment with what you wish to do in family medicine, which is awesome.
Yes.
So I want to ask there, when you say dehumanization, because there are medical students and residents who are listening and they might not have, experienced some of the dehumanization that we have, especially those who have chosen the path of DPC. So in your words, when you say dehumanization, what does that mean in terms of how a physician ends up being dehumanized and how a patient ends up being dehumanized in the fee-for-service system?
Yes. So again, there's so much to say here. There's so much to say. I mean, this goes all the way back to like the House of God and Samuel Shem. And there's a whole history of this process that you can follow sociologically, let alone like in the literature on professional identity formation. And, but I think simply put, it's probably not controversial or that a lot of patients, a lot of physicians experience the practice of medicine as a kind of bewildering force today in which they don't know how to quite locate themselves within it, both as a patient who maybe experiences their medicine as being treated almost like a machine. We say in training, treat them and treat them, as if patients are engines or cars. And there is obviously a sense in which the body has a kind of mechanical nature to it, but we're not machines. We're embodied, ensouled creatures. And the metaphors that I think are more protective of that vision of the patient tend to be more like garden metaphors, tending a tree. But then for practitioners too, and clinicians, the medicine now is beset by bureaucracy and a kind of demoralization. And those words aren't just sort of buzzword things. I think sometimes I get the sense that we just sort of memorize that word bureaucracy and kind of spit it out. But even that has a rich history. If you go back to Peter Berger, sociologist, his book, A Homeless Mind, he talks about how the two greatest sort of problems with modernity are bureaucracy, which forms a sort of learned helplessness. We all experience these great institutions that are just sort of bewilderingly complex. And how on earth do I navigate this, both as a clinician and as a patient? But then we also experience it as being demoralized, meaning literally the moral content of the work is harder to see, let alone articulate. And so we experience training as no one really asking, what is medicine for and what is my calling? And I'm taking a lot of this from Far Curlin and some of the writing he's done. But so yes, I think trainees go from this state of sort of wonder and articulating their calling in the language of vocation. And then at the end of that training process, we often describe it as just the job. I just got to kind of get through it and get it done. And I think the current wellness initiatives, though aiming at something good in a sense, don't quite hit the mark. They're not quite capturing the problem. But
Yeah, the many problems, sadly, that are out there and that we are working so hard to make a dent in and change. And we are definitely doing that. And it's very awesome that, ironically, we are recording this on Labor Day. So it's awesome that we have gone back to why we're doing medicine and who are our patients and what do they need and not what
Yes.
does the insurance need. So
Yes.
now I want to go back to this idea that you developed a friendship with the Fishers, and over time, that was your decision to go from where you had gone to residency in Anderson, which is near Greenville, to the Fisher Clinic. So the first question I'll ask when I talk about the geography there of your history is, when you were having the conversations that you had and developed this friendship with the Fishers, what was it that really impacted you that made it clear that you were going to go to their clinic in particular?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, again, it's just so much to say. It's hard to even know how to begin. I think the witness of their work, in the sense that they are deeply humble, rooted people. And, humility, it has a roots in hummus. It literally kind of the soil. So that language of being rooted in your place. And we talk about Wendell Berry all the time, and we all have a shared affection for Wendell Berry, a great agrarian essayist and poet. I mean, that poem they read on my third day here in clinic, doing our work like the falling snow, quietly, slowly, leaving nothing out. In many ways, that captures them, but they're just so self-effacing. I mean, obviously, there's a kind of promotional quality to any of the work that we do, but they maintained their patient panel simply by relationships they've fostered over the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, patients followed Dr. Lipinski's from his time practicing other places, and patients followed Dr. Fisher, which is a whole kind of separate story and a story they should tell. So I think I'll just say that, like, the humility and the character and integrity of their work was just so attractive. I didn't get the impression that these were guys who were trying to kill it financially. They were just trying to answer the call and do the work well as they knew how to do. And that required this new model. So that, and then I invited the Fishers down to my residency to speak about the doctor-patient relationship. And I think through those emails kind of back and forth, and, there's lots to say about how do you imagine new forms of practice within primary care land in this great conversation about the future of medicine, the future of medical training, and all the dehumanization stuff we talked about. So I think in that regard too, they were conversation partners trying to imagine more hopeful, rooted ways of doing medicine well before it was even on my radar to hope that I could possibly work for them. I don't know if that answers the question, but
It does. And I absolutely love that the ability to open up a new clinic under the direct primary care model from the fee-for-service clinics they came from, that it required the DPC model to be able to do the medicine that they wanted to do. So I think that's absolutely beautiful. Now, when you mention talking to the residents, I just want to drop this in before I go back to the geography part, but when you have talked to residents, younger residents, medical students, potentially, when you ask the Fishers to come speak, what in particular do you feel is really effective to get to the hearts and minds of the medical student or the resident who thinks that there's only one way you go from medical school to
yeah,
residency to being employed?
yeah.
What are potential game changers when it comes to speaking to a medical student or a resident in family medicine or primary care?
Yes, I've thought about this a lot. And in a sense, I think about it as a kind of hold my feet to the fire kind of thing. Like I don't think DPC is a panacea that's going to necessarily solve all of medicine's problems, and nor all the problems in primary care. I do think it is the wisest and most beautiful option available. And I said that to say that I have good friends, from residency, who are better clinicians than me, who are kinder clinicians than me, who are in a fee-for-service system and are going to be great doctors. I mean, I'm thinking of specifically my, Hal Harmon, Sajeev Alias, Burke Lackey, just anyway, good friends from my year in residency who I have such respect for, and they're going to do good medicine in their place. And in a sense, it's because they know that they're calling. And so what I like to do with students and residents is to try to take a step back and discern what is in fact your calling, because we need witnesses to the good, quiet work that DPC has within those systems in order to imagine other ways within those systems, if that makes sense. Anyway, that's how part of my research hat, I guess, is thinking about ethics and thinking about medical trainee formation. And if we told every family doctor to sort of leave academia and institutions and do DPC, that I don't know that that would solve all the problems. So again, it becomes a discernment issue of vocation and where do you sense that you should do the work. That said, one of the more fascinating kind of conversations I heard out of Dr. Fisher's time with us was just the simple question of how many patients should a doctor see a day? And I know this is a common theme, but we could talk about that for probably a whole half hour. But that was fascinating, right? Because you hear three distinct responses, and kind of hearing that debate go back and forth was fascinating. And I'll just say this, there was a point where one of the answers was basically kind of referencing what the ACGME dictates on how many patient encounters, and you can kind of extrapolate out from there what that looks like per day. And I'll just never forget Dr. Fisher very kind of simply saying, just notice that that is external to the patient's needs in front of you. It's not a metric that's easily mapped onto the person right in front of you. And again, that raises questions on like what's necessary and appropriate for training. Like I'm kind of an odd bird because I actually think family medicine residency should be harder and probably longer than it is, which is a whole separate conversation too. But my point is that what you need to see in training, the kind of saturation, crucible, it is different than what would be required of us outside of that training, it seems to me.
Absolutely. And I was on mute while you were saying this purposefully because I agree with so much of what you're saying. And when you were talking about how what's in alignment with external factors versus the patient, I definitely will call out those people in the audience who were saying patient at the same time you and I were. And it's just incredible. Like the people who say that totally get the root and the heart of DPC. And so when you talk about this idea that you talk to people about their vocation and thinking about their whys, I absolutely love that. And I, again, totally agree with that. I have been doing some residency talks with my old residency. And this year, coming up in the next few months, I'm going to be talking to first and second years. And so my slide deck is not a bunch of verbiage. It's literally the first slide that I get involvement with is, what do you love about family medicine? What do you love about your clinics? What is your most ideal day in your clinic? And some people have not really thought about that. And sadly, that was something that I experienced when I was talking with some third-year residents. And so I think that that's a really great takeaway for those of us who are potentially talking to medical students and residents and asking, where are they at? Why did they do family medicine? What have they been seeing? Because it really gets you into their shoes as much as possible when you're doing a quick talk. So I love that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Now I want to go back into that geography question because you've shared the excellent reasons as to why your calling was to join the Fisher Clinic. But I want to ask, especially for those people who are thinking about opening DPC in a place where they did not attend residency or medical school, what were some of the challenges that you experienced moving your family from Anderson, South Carolina, to up there in Raleigh, North Carolina? And what are some tips that you would have for other people potentially practicing DPC in a place where they've never practiced before?
Yeah, man, I don't know that I would have very wise things to say. I mean, part of that's probably a function just of my age, but we did live here for 2 years. And I think part of the geography thing too is like 20% of my time ish is with Duke Divinity School and the Theology, Medicine, Culture Initiative. So the point being, we already had an enmeshed, really thick, like hospitable, gracious social matrix, as one of my friends likes to say, here in the triangle that was sort of able to receive us, like our old life group leaders. And anyway, so we experienced it much more as just almost like coming home. That's why I struggled to know if I would have anything really helpful to say to somebody going to a new place, other than, at least from an abstract level, knowing the place you're going to go to, right? Like knowing that community and the rhythms that mark that community and figuring out how to kind of submit to them. But outside of the nuts and bolts of just, moving up a house with 3 kids, I mean, purge a lot, I guess.
Sounds like a great time.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Wonderful. Again, my wife is the real hero here, truly. No, I mean, we use it as an opportunity to kind of get rid of things and give things away. I mean, that's probably the only practical thing I would know to say. I don't know that my story is going to be helpful to the person looking in a new place, because for us, it was kind of a homecoming. We knew the place. We'd lived here for 2 years. We'd maintained all these relationships. I'd come back up here for conferences and things every now and then. So it was just kind of coming home.
I love that. And I think that high level pulling from what you just shared is that when you have that sensation that you are going home, that it's not causing you more anxiety and more potential depression or second guessing or whatnot than the feelings of wow, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but this is the next step that I need to take. And I know that in my heart and soul. So I think that that's a really high level, great tip to share, because if
Yeah.
people have that feeling, even if it's not in a place that they've practiced before, even if they don't know the
Yes.
community in terms of the patients who they are yet to serve, I think that's a thing to think about.
I will say, I am remembering something before the job offer came and before this was even on my radar. My wife and I bought a map and we literally put it in our living room on the wall. And we put two sticky notes above it. And it was the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. And then the second one was C.S. Lewis, this fascinating statement he makes to Arthur Greaves, where he basically says, do everything in your power to live among your friends. And I really think that's true. So I'll just leave it there, that like there's work to be done, go where the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. But then also I deeply think that's right. Like do everything you can to live among friends.
I think that's awesome. And that really goes back to my calling as to like why I do this podcast, because it is so incredible. Like you and I have never met really to talk before today. And I feel like we've known each other for a while just because it's so amazing to talk to DPC physicians. And we already have that commonality between all of us in
Oh
terms of why we're
yes.
going into
Yeah.
this. So this is incredible. Yeah. Love
No, I
it.
agree. It's a beautiful. That's Lewis again. Back. I mean, I love Lewis. So here I'm riffing on him again. But he talks about that in the Four Loves. That's one of the marks of friendship is you find yourself under a kind of unimaginable speed, already looking at the same horizon with this like shared vision. And anyway, it's wonderful.
I love it. So now I want to go to where you mentioned what before you got the job offer. So when you got the job offer, in terms of that time, were you hoping that you would get a job offer from the Fisher Clinic specifically? Had you come up with a backup plan?
Yeah. No, it truly was not on my radar to even ask them. And I can't remember. I think I knew that they were talking about a third, but no, I mean, we were literally preparing to submit resumes through, what is it, Physician Link. And again, we had that map. And I mean, I still am thinking about this, but I was thinking about there at St. Louis has a wonderful dual PhD in theology and healthcare ethics. And Aberdeen has a program that would align well with some of my research goals and stuff. But that was on my mind. Like, how am I going to possibly, it seems like I'm going to have to go like academic to sort of protect academic time. And so I'd been talking to folks around that idea. I think either at the same time or well before for the Fishers. I mean, they offered it over our breakfast table. Like it was a really beautiful, like there may have been tears. It was, again,
Awesome.
I know it's hard for me to talk about without getting emotional because I mean, these are friends and people I really care about who've babysat our kids and have cared for my wife and I in so many ways for 6 years. It's just, it didn't have the feeling of a job interview. They're friends.
So I'm just going to put this out there. Between yesterday and today, I have had you and another physician talk about tears or break down into tears. So I love this because you guys are whipping out the bottom of the heart there. So that's awesome. Now,
I blame it on my sons. I cry during commercials now. I can't visit. Yeah, just very grateful, very grateful.
absolutely. So when you got this amazing proposition to come to and join the Fisher Clinic, how was the arrangement set up? Could you talk to that? The reason I'm asking this is because there's lots of ways to bring on another physician. And so did you guys have a salary set up? Did you buy into the practice? Did you make your income based on the number of patients you signed on? How did it work for your setup?
So it's that last option. So it's membership based. So my pay is based on the prior month's production, I guess is the technical language for it. And the Fishers hired on Dr. Bob Adams over kind of basically 8 months, something like that. I can't remember exactly how long, but prior to me coming to sort of on ramp because they had such a long waiting list for so long. So that was the sort of overlap. I mean, that's how my salary works. And then right now I'm paid as a kind of consultant, I guess, for the divinity school on some of the work I'm doing there. And there's conversations around what that'll look like long term. That'll be a different form of pay. But so yeah, those are the two kind of nitty gritty salary things. And then Dr. Adams very graciously on ramped 170 patients. So I started with that number, which again is just an utter gift, and I get overwhelmed thinking about it.
And I think it's so awesome to highlight that because there are other people in the DPC space who have opened and quickly went to multiple hundreds. But
Yes.
the idea that you had someone to help with that onboarding, and that is like the most hardcore example of helping with that onboarding to actually see the patients and
Oh,
with
yeah.
the intention of you taking over their care,
Yes.
but not having to feel pressured to say, how am I supposed to get 170 patients in? And I'm
Right.
starting on day one with
Right.
no patients having been seen. So I think that that's a really, really interesting example for people to think about, especially if there's a DPC doctor who is retiring and who would like to help out,
Exactly.
or a person who is family medicine, likes the idea of DPC, but hasn't committed to it yet. A listener might be out there just like that and could see themselves, as Dr. Adams did, participating in DPC that way, or as you did, coming on with a physician who has onboarded your patients for you. So I think that's an incredible example. And thank you for highlighting that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hopefully there's a theme here in the sense that so little of this has been dependent upon me. I mean, I've really experienced it as like a kind of Jonah thing or something. It's being given incredible gifts. And, Marilyn Robinson has this lovely, lovely passage in her book, Gilead, where she talks about how there are these moments where it's like walking in a garden on Sunday morning after a light rain. And she says, you have to be careful where you step. I may be getting that off a little bit, but anyway, that's how I experienced it. I experienced it as someone has led me into this wonderful garden that I did not plant. And yet they're giving me a plow, and it's kind of like, be careful where you step, like receive it well. And anyway.
I love it. And in terms of stepping on the freshly wet ground, so to speak,
Yeah.
when you were working with Dr. Adams, knowing that you were going to be transitioning and taking care of the panel that he had onboarded, how did you guys collaborate in terms of like, did you have specific, okay, this is how he does his notes, I will make sure that I adapt my notes to how he does them? Or did you guys have a conversation about how your ideal notes would look so that you
Yes.
could understand the story of care for each patient? And I
No,
think
it's
of
great.
soap notes. Yeah, I think of soap notes as like, my ideal soap note is I'm telling my future self the story, so I know what the conversation was and where the next step was to be. So I just want to ask on those particulars because it could play a role in people who are in situations like you guys were, but also even for people taking call for other people, like if they're on vacation.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I really haven't thought about that, actually. I think it was important for me to take ownership, which is true. Like that's, and to do so at the beginning in a comprehensive and full-throated way. So I didn't mirror his notes, and nor do I really mirror Ben or Zane's notes. I developed my own sort of style and fill it in based on the notes that Dr. Adams had left me. So in that sense, they were great because I just sort of went through the whole chart and then kind of started over, obviously not reinventing the wheel, but starting over with my own way of writing. And I mean, look, I graduated, what is this, like 3 months ago? I've been here for 5 weeks, and I recognize that. And I think it's important for me to name that. So I'm still probably too much in resident note land. They're definitely too long. Anyway, so I'm trying to learn how to craft them in a more pithy way that doesn't, as Barry says, doesn't leave anything out, but is readable and tells the story well, as you said.
Yeah. And it's geared around your patient and not
Right.
codes
Yes, exactly.
that are
Oh my
justified
goodness.
because of the 14-point review of systems otherwise negative as noted in HPC. So yeah.
I know yes, I'll tell you and I suspect we'll talk about this more later, but that's been one of the most fascinating things, just mentally, is to track the different ways that your mind works in the room. I mean, compared to what you've been used to for years prior in training, it's really amazing.
Absolutely. And that actually, let's go to that next question, because that's exactly what I was going to ask about. You've in the past talked
Absolutely.
about
Yeah.
being present versus being absent. And so now
Oh yeah.
that you are fully responsible and in charge, as you say, to take care of your patients, how do you feel that you are present, whether that be in the way that you write your notes or the way that you practice medicine differently, because you are so close to residency and you can easily reflect back on like, whoa, 3 months ago, I was not doing this. And now I can because I'm a DPC doctor.
Yes. Oh gosh, I don't even know how to say this succinctly either. Well, let me say first that I'm taking that phrase from two people. The first is Stanley Hauer-Wass, ethicist, theologian at Duke, and my dear friend Ben Frush, who I've written a lot with, and I just have utmost respect for. I'm too emotional a person, but he's chief resident in their med peds program at Vanderbilt. Just brilliant mind, has been a great friend. He wrote this just incredible article that I have given to our medical students in some of the work I do, and this kind of curriculum on formation, where we would meet in the evenings once a month and talk about how we're being formed in our training process, and malformed, and how to become reformed, and what possibilities of medicine are open to us, all that stuff. But my buddy Ben describes the process of training as one in which you are suffering absence. Hauerwas describes medicine as suffering presence. And he kind of means that in two ways, that to do medicine well requires you to be present to the suffering. And that requires slowness and time and vulnerability and patience and forbearance and these virtues that you could argue are fading today. But the other sense is that to do that, you will suffer too. To do that kind of presence for someone, you're going to have to make sacrifices. I mean, Farr Curlin, he one time said, practicing a faithful medicine may look like seeing less patients and taking a pay cut. Like it may look like suffering presence, probably what it entails. And that, obviously that's for DPC, that can often be the case. But then Ben Frush says residency, unfortunately, probably is a form of suffering absence. You can't be present to the patient in the ways you long for because of the structure of the time and the pressure. And that in itself is a kind of suffering. It's a kind of cognitive moral dissonance that can be deeply bewildering if you feel called to be present to people. One of the more kind of painful things I was told kind of near the end of my training was that I did not seem to want relationship. And that was deeply heartbreaking for me because I experienced training as not being able to locate relationship within the rhythms of the practice. And other folks could do that. And I have utmost admiration for how they do it. I don't know how they do it. And I've experienced it as requiring more time to be able to do that kind of thing well. There's something magical about that 45-minute window hour. I mean, this is why therapists and counselors sessions are an hour. There's just something about time that opens up something that could not otherwise have happened. Anyway, I'm rambling on this, but yeah, I think to be present is the deepest call of medicine, at least within primary care land. I mean, a surgeon probably has a different kind of call, but no less present in her attention to the surgical field. But as medicine is currently structured, it's so easy to get distracted and to have your attention caught in a web of 30 other things. And I mean, that's life. You're always going to have things that are calling your attention. But, and I'll say this, I'm definitely rambling, but this is the last thing I'll say. That word attention is a fascinating word. It means to stretch towards, to reach out for. And if you experience medicine as kind of trying to reach out to your patient, but they're distracted, or more painfully, the patient is actually reaching out to you and you can't give them that attention, then it can be a really bewildering space for everybody involved.
Absolutely. And I'm sure the listeners are thinking about the many times in fee for service. And I get it. Like, it's DPC is not for everyone, but for me, I am still very much a carrier of the memories of, I know that I'm your doctor and I didn't have any space and you were told to go to urgent care. And if I would have known, I would have made time for you, or I am so frustrated because I don't have enough time in my schedule to fit you in. So yes, you're going to have to go to the urgent care.
Right.
And stretching yourself too thin, sometimes not even by your own desire to stretch yourself thin, but that's what the schedule demands of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Goes back to that dehumanization.
Yeah. I mean, no one goes into training saying, yeah, I want to like see 35 people. I want to see between 25 and 30 a day. And I want to be constrained in my time. Like no one goes into the process saying that's what I want, as I've experienced it and talked to other students and residents. They lament that that's what has happened to them. And they actively talk and struggle over our drinks at the end of the week, kind of lamenting and bemoaning, but then also like quite sincerely trying to speak together. How do we make this different? How do we do the medicine that we sense we're called to do, but we can't quite locate? Is burnout really enough? Doesn't seem like it's enough to really name this problem. Yeah.
Yep. And, even I think about it also from the patient's perspective, nobody told a patient that when you go to see your doctor, you're only allowed to say one problem because we only have the time to address maybe one problem by the time you get in the room. So when we talk about not stretching ourselves too thin, I absolutely love how you mentioned like 20% of your time is spent at the Duke Divinity School, and then the rest of your time is spent at the Fisher Clinic in terms of professional time. And so I want to ask about, what is your ideal quote unquote full panel, and what are the thoughts that have led you to estimate that would be your full panel? And what does your ideal balance of life career-wise look like with that particular panel in mind?
Yes. Yeah. Obviously, these are conversations that I think for me were just crucial to have as candidly and directly as possible with Ben and Liz. I mean, my wife, first and foremost, like what are the rhythms of our family that we long for, that we've hoped to structure into our weekends and all that. But then we're adjacent to it, the Fishers, and Liz has been particularly helpful. Barry has this line about grabbing abstract ideas behind the ear and leading them back down to the ground. And she's just been a wonderful conversation partner and director for me to think critically about how this could actually work. Something we said at the beginning is that Fisher Clinic is 100% FTE, right? So even the language of 20% of my time is at Duke, though practically true in the sense that I have Tuesday mornings and Thursday afternoons blocked for academic research and writing work, the patient will always come first. So if I'm doing that work and there's a need that the patient has, we kind of call it like level 8 to 10 needs versus a level 3 need, then the patient's need trumps my academic time. So we try to be really clear about that. So that's the rhythm of my week. I'm in clinic like their physician would be. Tuesday mornings and Thursday afternoons are slotted for research and writing time with the Divinity School and the Theology, Medicine, Culture Fellowship. Some Thursdays I will commute to Durham and I'll be present on campus to kind of mentor fellows. They have something called Theology and Soup where we meet with the cohort and talk through how they're experiencing the fellowship. And the goal is to have future kind of teaching within those 2 blocks as well and all that stuff. In terms of ideal panel, the number that we keep kind of imagining together is probably something like 600. But again, it depends on the patient panel, obviously. And that seems to be ideal for me. But again, I always want to be very careful, not necessarily careful, but just only speak out of what I know. And since I've only been here for 5 weeks, could be that 400 is the limit, but we've talked about 600.
Awesome. And I just go back to when you were between your 3rd and 4th year of medical school, even considering leaving medicine, and you took this opportunity to go to Duke Divinity School. I feel that you had paid attention to as Marcy Radar had shared at the DPC Summit in Kansas City, you paid attention to your guardrails or your boundaries in terms of knowing Dr. Eberly, because you have been in your body longer than 5 weeks. Like when you think about your guardrails in general, what are some of the things that you pay attention to make sure that you are continually present along the pathway that is keeping you calm and focused and able to still be yourself while being able to be present in the community for others like your patients?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I mean, the book I'm reading right now, Radical Hope, it's by Jonathan Lear. It's ethics in the face of cultural devastation, which is fascinating, kind of close analysis of Plenty Coup and the Crow people. But he has this part in that book where he talks about how we are defined by our limits and our finitude. We're finite creatures, and we're defined by our eros, our desire to know, our longing. So humans want to know things, but we're finite and there's a limit to what we can know. So how do you deal with that tension? And I think we probably need a healthy dose of reminder of our finitude today. I think the optimization culture scares me, frankly. I guess the kind of idea of how can I optimize my body and my time in such a way that I'm getting maximum yield from every part of me. And I guess part of this is my formation as a Christian, but is leaving the corners of your field unharvested for 2 reasons. Like, because we need at least 2 reasons. We need rest deeply. It's built into the rhythm of everything in creation, as far as I can tell. Things sleep and pause, and we should too. But then second, because it leaves the space to serve others, and you can't predict that. How that will come upon you. And that sounds way more holier than thou than I don't do this in the ways that I hope to do. But I guess to answer your question more practically, it's just lots of candid, very clear, very direct conversations with my wife and with my partners and with the folks at Duke. I mean, again, because of the virtue of the kind of friendships and relationship we have, we're seeking mutual collaboration and mutual forms of flourishing together. And we kind of just lay it out on the table as much as possible. And so emphasizing that level of transparency. I mean, I literally will ask Ben and Liz, hey, like the div folks are sort of thinking maybe I could do this. What do y'all think of that? And then same thing, like, so there's a very much an openness of, they're not just my partners and in a sense, my boss, they are friends, and that can be sticky territory, but I've experienced it essentially only as protection and care and friends who want you to flourish and are going to speak plainly if they think something's going to be too much. And what I found is so far, it almost always lines up with the sense I get through prayer and through conversation with my wife.
Yeah. And so on that note, I want to ask, if you were to take your experience and pull from a high level as to things that you have questions or considerations about your life that you've gone back to, if you were to say to the audience, hey, in 1 year out of residency, whether you're in fee-for-service or DPC, these are the 3 top things I would think about to check in with yourself to see, are you still in alignment with what your goals were? And are those goals still, the goals you wish to achieve, versus if someone were at their 3 years out of residency journey, 5 years out of residency journey?
I'm retreating to a philosopher again, but this is back to Lear, back to Kant. But what can I know? What should I then do? And what should I hope for? I think I'll just say those 3 things. What is it I know about myself and about my community and about my patients and the rhythms of my life? And what can I conclude from that knowledge? What then should I do? What is my calling? What am I going to do with my life? And then what should I hope for? What is appropriate to hope for? And hope is a powerful thing, but it's linked to action. It's linked to knowledge.
Well, I think, Dr. Eberly, you have, as they say, understood the assignment. So that was amazing. And I think that is really a great platform to build off of, because you could insert, am I in alignment with what I want to do for my family goals, for my professional goals, whatever it is. So that's incredible. So now, in closing, would you like to share any last words with our audience in terms of, if someone were to consider DPC, in addition to what you've shared, what would you tell them?
I'll say this. I have a note on my phone right now that I'm just sort of updating almost daily of things I want to write about maybe in 6 months. I sense that I need more time. I'm still young and I'm still new into it, and I want to be careful there. And it's been a delight updating that note. And I was thinking about that note today, and I was thinking about things I would tell students. And I'll just very briefly just say these few things. One is, a patient came in. This is in the first week, and in his literal words, when I walked in the room, I said, "Hey, I'm Dr. Eberly. I'm the new guy." And he said, "I'm looking forward to dying with you." And it was just such a powerful moment for me of like what that call makes to you, let alone how the model protects that call to actually happen, that it actually is possible through this model that I could know this man well enough to help him die well, to be with him as he dies, that kind of thing. And I guess the last thing I'll say too, just to maybe any students or residents who are listening, is that the ways in which this has been healing for me and the ways I've listened to patients describe how this model is healing for them are just beautiful and worth telling and writing about. This is a model in which time becomes not a burden, but a gift, that you actually have the time. There's time to study and deep dive into things that you may have not experienced having the time to do in residency. For me, there's been a kind of delightful return to the fullness of the physical exam. I mean, in some ways, residency trains you out of touching people. And so many patients come to us saying, the doctor didn't touch me, and that's why I'm here. Yeah. I mean, I think we used to be thankful when there were no shows in clinic. This is probably a universal resident experience, is my understanding. And now we're genuinely sad, because these are patients we know, and there's a deep sense of belonging, because it's not tied to production, it's tied to belonging. Okay, I'm saying too much. I'll stop there.
That was awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much, Dr. Eberly, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. This was really, really wonderful. And yeah, thank you.
Next week, look forward to hearing from Dr. Jose Buenostro of Buenvida Health in Turlock, California. If you've enjoyed the podcast and you haven't yet done so, subscribe today and share the episode with a physician you may know who needs to hear about DPC. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify now, as well, as it helps others to find all these DPC stories. Lastly, be sure to follow us on social media. If you're wanting to continue learning more about DPC in the meantime, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Concepcion.